Welcome into another edition of the BlueWhite Tailgate Pawcast. Frank Bodani of the York Daily Record, Mike Gross of LNP, and Andrew Klista here for another exciting week of Penn State athletics. And Happy Valley, guys, it's like the city that never sleeps. Penn State football, something's always churning and burning. What the college football gods give it with Jim Knowles, they now take it away with Ja'Juan Seider, now a running back coach of Penn State. Great running backs coach from Penn State, off to Notre Dame. Our initial thoughts on this move?
Yeah, I didn't see it coming. I don't think anybody did. I think it's kind of interesting that these teams that are more or less at parallel levels within the college football universe can kind of hire away from each other. And Seider was there for 7 years. And as James Franklin said when he talked to the media the other day, that's kind of a long time in the current environment. I think Seider seemed like a guy that the players really connected to. I'm sure he is a very good running backs coach. When they hired him, the big deal about it was supposedly going to be his recruiting connections in Florida. And I don't know how much they really reaped from that. So I mean, I don't want to downplay his significance, but that's just an observation from the recruiting side of it.
Yeah, I think you focus on the whole 7 years as a long time factor because this is reality. I mean, Ja'Juan Seider was there far longer than what Penn State will be afforded most of their assistants. And they got a great run out. But the thing is, you're going to lose guys like this, and you're going to lose them to what people think are just parallel type jobs and opportunities. And I think you got to get used to it that, it's just maybe time for him to move on. He's friends with or knows the head coach well at Notre Dame. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. The key here then is how can Penn State react? How can Penn State maybe even better their situation? That's always the opportunity, right? For James Franklin is you lose somebody, how can you take advantage actually of it? And I think that's what we'll be interested to see because there's some, interesting, not maybe the number of candidates out there at this time of the year in mid-February, but I think some interesting ones that will help what really I think is one of the best rooms in the country.
Yeah, and if we're going to talk about recruiting, you have to talk a little bit about the role that Seider had in recruiting the running backs that they did, which I'm sure he had a significant role in that, and they've done that as well as anybody, I would say. I thought James, now I wasn't there the other day, but I watched the whole thing on video and I wrote something about it. And I thought James was in a very good sort of subtly, he was in a very good mood, a very good expansive mood. I think my sense is that he's sort of feeling good about himself right now. So I think he's pretty confident that he can go out there in the hiring market and get a good running backs guy.
Well, every challenge is an opportunity in disguise, and we know he's always going to be positive. The only time he's ever negative is in sometimes interactions with fans, coming down. Not to be anything confused with Coach Hurley at UConn, who seems to be all negative all the time in his interactions with fans.
I mean, what is he, a pro wrestling villain?
I don't know. You're winning a couple championships at UConn. We get that you're the best coach in college basketball. You don't need to tell refs that. You don't need to be saying how many rings you have when you're out at Creighton. Win the game, move on. I thought that was classless, but
that'll out.
Living in the shout. Continuing on with Penn State football. Yeah. How about James talking about Will Raymond, an analyst, dropping his name in the presser in regarding to Jim Knowles, and now that name's going to come up in the coaching search for a running back coach. We get him all this stuff, and he puts in all the research, and this is just another guy. And you look at his biography, Mississippi State alum, Fordham, obviously. Coach Joe Moorhead connections there a little bit leading to Penn State, but he is having a little bit of an outside role in finding guys that come in and in Phillip Place. Here is James Franklin on what him and the staff are going to be tasked with in what they're looking for a new running back coach.
Got to go out and get the very best candidate we can. And again, there's a list that's probably not as deep as people think of candidates that can come to Penn State. And, in hiring, in my mind, it's about how are you going to get the return on your investment. And what I mean by that is there's some young guys that you can hire that are on an upward trajectory, are going to have really good careers, but you may not get the return on your investment until year 2. And then there's other guys that are much more seasoned, but you want to make sure that they haven't gotten to the point of their career where their career is starting to decline and go in the opposite direction. So you got to find that sweet spot of a guy that's got enough experience, both in coaching and in recruiting at this level, and that we're going to get the return on our investment quickly.
He should be confident because every chance he gets, he keeps saying about the alignment of the university.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Slap. I mean, I don't want to keep saying he's back in the bus over Sandy Barber, but it keeps going over and over again because he can't stop saying it enough.
He keeps putting the bus in reverse.
Well, I think what it is that he finally has the ability, we'll just say it simply, to maybe just simply get who he wants, a better chance of getting who he wants now because of the resources than what he had. And imagine what that must feel like if you, or the opposite of that, if you in 6, 7, 8 years ago knew that you maybe couldn't really truly go get the 1 or 2 guys, you could make the best play for the 1 or 2 guys you thought would fit best. You couldn't do it. Now you can. That's a whole different world of operation. We just saw it with Jim Knowles. It won't be the same level with the running backs coach, but with the limited number of maybe candidates that you're looking at that you really like, you may need that alignment just as much right now to get the 1 or 2, try to get the 1 or 2 guys who you think might be heads above everybody else.
And the one thing that in this sort of area, the one thing that I wanted to, that I would have asked James about if I'd have gone up there on Tuesday, was this idea of hiring a general manager, a guy who's going to be a money guy and looking forward to what the future might be of the sport, having a general manager that sort of similar to a general manager in pro sports. I would like to know if there's any progress that's been made on that. And also I would like to know if, going back to the alignment thing here, if there is alignment about the idea that that's necessary and the idea that that's a direction they're going to go. So I wish I would have been up there to ask him that.
I think they already have a general manager pseudo in place, if not necessarily, big money, big, name grabbing headline, but I think that's kind of already in place. What I'm more impressed with is, and as we work to get Pat Kraft on the show, kind of the new direction in the athletic department and all the branding stuff that has come out and the direction for the athletic department, top to bottom of all the athletic teams. And I think that speaks more towards Penn State being ready for the new era in revenue sharing more so than a general manager coming in and making these changes. Because I for one, if I'm being asked, if I take it from a fan's perspective, if you're going to pay a general manager big money to move money around almost like pro sports, it's almost like counterproductive where the money should be going to the players and the athletes. So if more money is being filtered into another athletic department staffer to manage that, I don't feel like that's in the best interest of the players. And I just think that's counterproductive in terms of the whole goal of maximizing the revenue profits or maximizing the profits and the name, image, and likeness for the app.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, whether or not we think it's a good idea, I think James Franklin at least gave the impression that he thinks it's a good idea. I don't know. I don't know where they are with that. And again, I wish I would have got the chance to ask him.
Frank, any thoughts on that?
You know what? That's money stuff. I'm going to let that to James Franklin because I think you both make good points. how they, obviously they're handling it right now. We saw it. They now have the highest paid assistant coach in college football history on their staff. So how, what will they do with the running backs? I mean, it's an interesting, you just are paying reportedly someone $3.1 million a year to run your defense. What are you going to do at running backs? Because as we know, Penn State has always been able to get really good running backs. That's never been a problem, but they also have some on board that are they going to be able to keep them? And you have to have guys to the level of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen in this day and age to go where you want to go. So you can't just have good ones. We saw Ja'Juan Seider and Penn State try to operate with good ones in the past, and where that went and it didn't go real well. You have to have the elite ones, and you have to be able to keep your elite running backs on board like Messiah Mickens.
Well, Frank, is there anybody on the current roster other than Allen and Singleton who you think are on the level of Allen and Singleton?
I'm not so sure there is anyone on the current level. Now, that's kind of sounds like it's taken away from what the other 5 scholarship running backs. Well, we haven't really got a chance to see. Like, we really haven't got a chance to see what truly, for example, Quentin Martin can do at full role. But I think they have at least maybe even more highly touted guys committed to them verbally in the 2026 and 2027 classes that are even more highly rated national running back.
This would be Messiah Mickens, who you just mentioned him as a kid from the Harrisburg area, who's kind of been on board since he was in 8th grade or whatever. He is a guy who probably is, at least in terms of the way he's perceived as a recruit, is on the level of Singleton and Allen, right?
Absolutely. He is with the 2026 class, and I think he has big decisions to make because, obviously he was close to Ja'Juan Seider. He's getting recruited, of course, still by all other schools. Well, that rush we know that how hard that ramped up after his running backs coach just left. But they also have one of the top running backs in the country in the 2027 class committed to them from McKeesport, Kemen Spell, and that's another national guy that's a long way away, but that's the level of running back you need to have to go to the college football playoff semifinals, at least to me.
I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Well, just going on Messiah Mickens, he was at Trinity High School. Who was the head coach at Trinity High School when he was there? Jordan Hill. State defensive tackle who's up there. Who was also there? Michael Motti for a time as Jordan's defensive coordinator, both at Penn State. So the ties to Penn State are very deep for Messiah Mickens. I know he transferred out of Trinity, and then I believe he was at Harrisburg last year for Coach Calvin Emerald. Obviously, James Franklin isn't shy and has been able to go into Harrisburg and the Coach Cal's program and pull out guys, Micah Parsons being one. But Messiah Mickens did say that other schools did jump up on board when the news broke about that. He also did put a picture out of him standing next to Coach Seider, and it said, "My God." Now, these are all things that, in the land of 16, 17, 18-year-olds, everybody wants to post something on social media because that's obviously the most important thing to do in that very moment. That to read the tea leaves on that, I think that's further down the road. And he did say that he's going to wait and see that James Franklin isn't going to go out and just hire some run-of-the-mill running back coach. You're always going to bring in a good coach. So, you think Penn State fans pump the brakes on that a little bit with the connections Mickens has to Penn State and how long he's been committed?
Well, pump the brakes, maybe. Sure, yeah, I would say pump the brakes. Another thing about Mickens is that when he was first sort of becoming a national recruit, he was this smaller speed guy, but he's really developed physically, and he's almost as good a defensive player now. He plays on both sides of the ball. He really has become a big get. I mean, Penn State does not want to lose him. I think that's fair to say.
No, and the key is you can still get national caliber quality, top quality running backs from their regular recruiting footprint. So you don't need to go to Florida to get a guy like Nick Singleton or Mickens or the guy in the 27 class or any of those others. So you have to have somebody, you have to be able to still understand, you have to be able to have somebody that, you might have somebody who has a great knowledge and recruiting ability just in the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio area. I don't think it's imperative that you have somebody that has special ties down south or out west or anywhere else.
I would agree with that, and I think James Franklin would agree with that based on what he said on Tuesday. I thought it was kind of interesting that he said something to that effect. We would probably be looking for a guy who's within our footprint recruiting. Didn't he say something like that?
Yeah, he did. And I think the really kind of interesting thing was he described in detail how the difference or the challenge between trying to go after a guy who's young and up and coming as opposed to an older guy who's very experienced, but is he at the top of his game? And he's talked about both sides of that, and he made a point to say, hey, young and up and coming or not, whether you're going to have a great career in 5 years, we can't wait for you to have a great career in 5 years. I thought that really, to me, was telling about how he feels about his program now, his team now. And Deion Barnes worked, but I'm not sure they can take a chance on a guy like Deion Barnes for a position like this right now.
That's an excellent point. They're very much in it for the short term. Let's go win the whole deal right now.
Names are always flown out. It's not even out there 10 seconds that Seider is off to Notre Dame and already the replacement lists are flying around. Who is on the replacement list for you guys? I saw DeMarco Murray floating around. That one appears to be past. Stan Drayton, former head coach from Temple, seems to have the regional ties. Murray would fit that category of what you were saying about, young and up and coming, has all the panache of the Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles, but can you coach at the college level? So maybe James can't wait on that. And again, he's at Oklahoma. So who do you guys have on the list for James Franklin?
Well, other than the ones that you named, I really don't have any idea. I used to be one of those writers who, when one of these openings came up, I would try to quickly come up with a list, and I realized that was a little bit silly. So I don't know, Frank. What do you got? Anything?
Well, I think Stan Drayton is definitely a guy to consider, and he really stands out to me because he's, I don't know if I'd say he's an outlier, but he's the one really experienced, and we're going to say older, Mike, because he's like 54. So what do you think of that? Older. Anyway.
Very pointed shot there, Frank.
Yes. He's done this job, meaning coaching running backs at an elite level for a long time. He just was the head coach at Temple, but his forte is coaching running backs and working with the offense, not being a head coach. So he would, experience-wise, fit this. He's open, right? He's not working somewhere. But obviously we don't know what James Franklin's relationship or what he thinks.
That's why I sort of...
Well, to me, he stands out because a lot of the other guys that make sense are all guys pretty much in their 30s to 40, and they're younger guys. And I'm not sure who stands out above one or the other, whether it's the guy coaching running backs at Boston College or at Temple or Rutgers or maybe what Chad Scott's, I think, coaching them at West Virginia is a name that's come up, but they kind of all blend to me. I'm not sure which one of those guys would I think a lot of it, who would interview the best? And does one of those guys seem like, no matter their age, he's ready to come in and do this better and do it at an exceptional level right now? And that's James Franklin. That's what James Franklin, though, is supposed to be really good at, except when it comes to wide receiver coaches, maybe. Oh, okay. But everywhere else, yes, real quick.
Which, by the way, wasn't Coach Seider, did he put in the chaos that led to the wide receiver coach? There was the hire from Army, and then Seider became available, and they had to go out.
That's right. Very good.
Is the running back coach from Army all of a sudden is coaching wide receiver? Stop the presses. Somebody called Doge. Army doesn't throw the ball. It doesn't work in Big Ten play. That I kind of point towards was like, this is.
I'm not sure there was a lot of alignment back then, if we may say it. Okay. Back when he was hiring David Corley and Ja'Juan Seider, I think they I don't know if they'd say they struck gold with Seider, but I think they hit on him. But it wasn't the same type of hiring process, I don't believe, back in that day. It's different now.
It's different. It clearly wasn't. James fired that guy from Army, I think, like 15 minutes after the bowl game ended. I can remember that day. I spent that whole day in the Orlando airport. I think it was Orlando. Was I Orlando that year? I mean, I wrote like 6 stories that day sitting in the Orlando airport because there was so much crap going on after what had been a kind of mediocre Penn State season.
There was a couple hirings and firings that were very quick. A special teams coach was involved in there because I remember there was the comment about he has a family, and then somebody said, "Well, didn't this coach have a family?" And then so why stop
players? There were some players that announced that day.
Yeah.
All that stuff. Yeah.
Completely different times right now. And I got to tell you, I think that shows the maturity process of James Franklin as the head coach and streamlining everything in his program. And I was one, when I was on the beat every single day, I would always go back to, I'm going to make sure people are comfortable being uncomfortable after that 2018 game against Ohio State. And we are not going to stop until we're elite. And I hate the term elite because I think it's a made up term. Like all of a sudden you're elite because you won this game and whatever you won before that is discontinued. Or if you lose this game, all of a sudden everything is thrown out the window. So I hate that term. But I think since then we could finally point, and I used to love to talk to Curtis Jacobs about this at linebacker. Used to love to talk to him about that term. I think from James's side, I think everything is coming together, and the alignment of the university is obviously a big deal with that. And is there a position that James Franklin, you could point out, has done a better job at than always having, pretty much outside of one 2-year cycle, always having a stud running back?
What position?
Oh, I would agree. Yeah, I think he's
position group. And defensive line has been great. Tight end's been great. But I mean, when you have a Saquon Barkley and a Miles Sanders, and I know there was a little bit of a lull there, but then you come back with the 2 guys you have there right now for 3-4 years. I mean, you got to say that maybe running back has been James Franklin's forte in getting high-priced talent to come to the university. I'm not afraid to put that up there.
Especially, so much so that some of the guys that they have that didn't really work out were super highly regarded guys. That's just the nature of it. There's going to be some of those. But you go from Barkley to Miles Sanders, who was an excellent NFL running back. I mean, he's not Barkley because nobody is Barkley, but and now these 2 guys they have now are just monsters, and they've done great in that area for whatever reason.
I mean, for recruiting, they've been really good at identifying guys early and developing them for the most part. Now, I think running back lends you to that because I think it's a much easier position, for example, to recruit than, say, an offensive lineman because they're so hard to predict. Like where's an offensive lineman headed in 2-3 years? I think it can be kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah.
Okay. But the early identifying of the running backs, and we're talking, for example, no better than Barkley, who was committed to Rutgers when Penn State went after him, stayed on him, and basically James Franklin said, I'm not taking no for an answer. He was not a national recruit. When Penn State got his verbal commitment, he was not. Let's not forget that. And kudos to Penn State for identifying his skill and what he could do at that age. I mean, that's the key. And I think they've done it in different means, almost equally effective on the defensive line, but really defensive end, edge rushing. Being able to get Chop Robinson to come in the spring transfer portal window when, other than recruit Nicks, nobody knew what he might end up doing. Abdul Carter was not a 5-star recruit coming out of Philadelphia. But the day we were there, the day that Abdul Carter arrived on campus, and he's walking across the field, James Franklin stops the press conference and says, "Look at that guy." And we're like, okay, that's like a freshman who just got here today. But his point was, we know who we think he's going to be. Well, he may be the number 1 pick in the draft.
That's when you, that's when you know that your in-house recruiting people are doing a great job. I think that's where Georgia has been for a while now, where we don't care what 24/7 and Rivals and ESPN say, go get this dude, and he turns out to be this Carter on the Eagles. I think Penn State is getting to that point where they have this gigantic staff of recruiting analysts who know what they're talking about.
Speaking of Carter, when did you guys know he arrived? Obviously, he's invited to the Combine as the Combine officially went out for the NFL. I'm a little bit shocked Penn State didn't have more guys get one. I'm shocked Kimber didn't get an invite. I thought Penn State would get him an invite out there. But from what I saw, Carter, King, Warren, and I know I'm missing one. Keandre
Winston and Jalen Reed.
Thank you. Was drawing a blank on the defensive backs right there. But when did you know that Carter was going to be the Abdul Carter that he ended up? For me, it was the play where he chased down an Auburn, I believe it was a running back or a wide receiver in the flat, and basically threw him down and stood him over. The play is open on YouTube. That, for me, as a freshman, said, this guy has arrived a bit early, and he's going to be a wrecking ball.
Well, how about his first play of the game where he goes and lashes through into the backfield and gets thrown out for targeting? I mean, he gets thrown out of the game against Purdue in the first game of his career, but the play that got him into targeting was like, whoa.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's a good point. Yeah.
Now, this year's play, even though he's well along his career, I thought was the most impressive was it the play at Purdue is that the one you're talking about where he chased the guy down from behind?
No, I was talking about his freshman year at Auburn.
Right, freshman year. Well, how about the play this year when he chased the guy from behind and had literally a 10-yard head start on him?
Yeah.
And he comes from nowhere and jumps on his back like what? A cheat on a gazelle or something, and just out of nowhere.
Beautiful imagery.
Out of nowhere. I mean, the speed that he used in pursuit was just stunning.
Yeah.
And production or not, he's getting held every play or not. It's that type of athleticism, and to me, in that moment, that I'm not sure how many people in college football could have done what he just did on that play. I don't think very many, if any.
The ability to close in like a little 5-yard area is what's kind of astonishing with him. The ability to see where there's a play, to recognize and get there unbelievably quick. I don't know. I think it was a gradual thing with him, and I think moving him to end this year to me was the final step of. Yeah, but I mean, I didn't go off as prescient as you guys see him.
Apparently, everybody's impressed with him possibly going number 1, number 2, not falling out of the top 3, except Warren Sapp, because Warren Sapp thinks an edge rusher from Penn State does nothing. If anybody saw what he said about Micah Paul.
What a stupid comment. Whether it's Penn State or any school. You know, I mean, Myles Garrett is from Texas A&M. Whoa, what about an edge rusher from Texas A&M? What? He's trying to sound like flippant and cool, and he sounds like a moron to me. I mean, but I was not because it's Penn State and not because it's Carter, just anybody. Like, why would you dismiss a player? Because Lawrence Taylor went to North Carolina.
Well, I was more offended that he dismissed Micah Parsons' stats. And then you had
Well, that's true too. Yeah.
yeah, 15. I mean, what's Mike average? Like 13 and a half sacks in his career per season. So is that
didn't Chop Robinson have a pretty good rookie year? I mean, didn't Odafe Owe hasn't he been pretty good with the Ravens? I mean, if Micah didn't get a chance to play edge rusher at Penn State, but that's where he was headed. I mean, that's the type of player he is. So
I mean, this is like Sapp's in Radio Row at the Super Bowl, so he has to be flippant. He has to be boom and make a snarky comment. Well,
but we just named 4 guys in a row. Didn't we?
Yeah, think a little bit. Think.
That's not him. That's not him. Now, we talk about the Super Bowl. Saquon Barkley, I think we were all well off on our yardage predictions for how that was going to go. But hey, he got his ring. He got MVP votes this year. Why not just retire and come back and coach running backs at Penn State? Go out on top, baby. Forget it.
I don't
want a Tonight Show, shotgun and beers.
Yeah, there we go.
Just come back to Penn State, coach running backs. But I'm not shocked, and this is one thing I wanted to bring up. Saquon Barkley, we go from talking about Warren Sapp and a stupid comment, always finds a way to come out first class all the time. When they had Saquon Barkley Day, the resolution in the state of Pennsylvania, I was the one that asked him about his name being pronounced wrong. And he was like, people shouldn't be laughing. Person was nervous saying my name. And then they asked him about Taylor Swift being booed. And he comes right to the defense. Not that Taylor Swift needs anybody in the defender from Eagles fans booing her in the Caesars Superdome. But Saquon Barkley comes right to her offense about all the great things that she does. He's first class all the way. There's never been something that Saquon Barkley has done that somebody would shake their head at.
Yeah, he's really smooth in terms of dealing with the media, and even when he's not particularly enlightening or revealing or anything, he's at the very least inoffensive and leaves a good impression, right? I mean, I think he's pretty good at that. I thought he seemed a little bit flummoxed by the Tonight Show, a little bit, but he still did fine. It was fine, and he does have that ability to just handle everything, kind of take it in stride and do it. And he's really something. I think he's the best player that we've covered at Penn State. And to see him go from a horrible team situation to a great team situation and have it totally cash in like this, where you end up winning the Super Bowl, it's almost like a Disney film type thing that has actually happened. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, we even saw him do that kind of similarly at Penn State, where in 2015, by the end of the season, Penn State was a train wreck. I mean, they lost their last 4 games of the year.
Yeah,
Barkley, I always think of that season the way it started at Temple, for God's sakes. And Saquon getting 1 carry and Hackenberg getting sacked 10 times, that kind of sums up a little bit of his first year. Look where he ended it. And look how he started his NFL career, not even who he was with, but the problems we saw with injuries and production, and that playing that position at that level, for him to do what he's done this year, leaping backwards. Yeah, we'll never see that again over guys.
No,
I don't.
He's an easy one to root for, and I know we're not supposed to do that in our business, but he does make it easy to actually root for. And there's multiple reasons for that.
The Chiefs,
30 years in a press box when he played at Iowa in 2017, that opposing reporters were like, every time he did something, you're getting these reactions like, I can't believe what I just saw. I've never seen that kind of situation over a player before that or since that.
That was a masterpiece.
Best game was the player that I've ever witnessed.
You'll never see a player play a better game than that one. Yeah. And
that year,
I was just going to say about the Super Bowl, the Chiefs obviously were determined to take him away, and they did a great job of it. And I was amazed how many times they had 3 bodies gang tackling him, and one of them was a number in the 20s. So it's a defensive back. So they're giving something up, and the Eagles were able to take care were able to take advantage of what they gave up in order to stop him. So you could say indirectly that his impact was in that game was more significant than his numbers would indicate.
I remember being down at a game at Maryland, and Penn State thrashed the Terps. James has a big recruit coming up that's committed to that. That we'll see how that plays out in a little bit. But a bunch of NFL scouts were sitting next to me in the press box because I was in the second row, and I don't know how I got next to the NFL scouts, but they all got up and left with about 3 minutes left in the second quarter because Penn State was already well on their way to blowing the doors off of Maryland. And the next thing you know, I just asked, where are you guys going? He's like, there's no use being here if 26 is only going to carry the ball 6 times, he said to me. They were specifically, with all the talent that was on Penn State's team, they were specifically there. 3 scouts were there to see, all from different teams, to see Saquon Barkley play. And there's a lot of talent that was on Penn State's team.
Yeah.
Not always stuck out.
Yeah, they knew, and I mean, obviously, what was he, the 6th pick or something like that, by the Giants when he got drafted, but it was something like that, yeah, they knew, and now it's all happened. What people foresaw has now happened.
John Mayer's worst nightmare goes to our most popular player goes to Philadelphia. Win the Super Bowl with MVP votes. Real quick on wrestling, Frank. It's a big weekend for Penn State wrestling. I don't think the match or the dual losing streak is in jeopardy, but some statistics are a little bit in jeopardy as Penn State's lineup is a little bit banged up top to bottom here with 2 road duels coming up. First with Ohio State on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State hasn't lost more than 2 bouts in a single dual meet this year. They didn't even give up a takedown last weekend, but they had 2 of their starters that are hurt, and we don't know when exactly. Braden Davis at 133 and number 1 Tyler Kasich at 157 pounds. We're not sure when those 2 are going to wrestle again. It almost seems to me that with just this weekend and one more dual match that you might just wait for the Big Ten championships, if that, for those 2 guys. So if that's the case, Penn State would not be favored in either of those bouts. And there's also one of the best matches in the country this season in Penn State's number 3, Bo Bartlett, against number 1, Jesse Mendez at 141. Bo Bartlett's lost 3 matches in a row. Tough ones to Jesse Mendez, but even if all 3 of those go against Penn State, they still win 30-something to 10 probably. So there you go. It's all perspective, right? They might get pushed harder than ever and still win by 20 points.
Mike, you missed our interview with Jeff Byers. Obviously, he's always up in the press box during the football season doing radio duties, but he was great. If you didn't have a chance to listen to that, make sure you go back and listen to the last week's episode. Jeff Ironhead Byers talking about the program. Mike, we were joking if the Department of Justice, they've broken up big banks in American history. They've broken up oil companies. They've broken up Apple, Microsoft, or attempted to break up Apple. Microsoft, was in the 90s or something like that? I don't know. That might be a little bit before my time on that. I asked Jeff, does the Department of Justice have to break up Penn State wrestling with how it's dominated? He just chuckled and he's like, it's good for wrestling in the inspiration that these guys provide, and they never leave an arena until every single autograph is actually signed for all these young wrestlers, and it's up to the other programs to come up and step up. So
if Penn State was ordinary in wrestling, would we be talking about it right now?
No.
If there was no program like Penn State, would people be talking about college wrestling less or more? Less, right?
Absolutely.
It would be way more regionalized in the Midwest without having Penn State out here in these. And I know Pennsylvania, the state, is tremendous in high school wrestling.
Yeah, that's true.
You either have the PA guys or you got to beat the PA guys to win a national championship at the NCAA level. That was said years ago. But it's just something having Penn State be a powerhouse. I do believe it just expands the footprint a little bit, maybe a lot, talking about wrestling nationally. Any closing thoughts? Anything that we missed on a short, brief episode here as we go through the offseason here with Penn State athletics?
Well, I look forward to the time when you are explosive out of the blocks again, AK, and I know that's coming. And so we wish you well in your convalescence, as they say.
Yes. Don't try to dance too much at the wedding this weekend.
Yeah. The guys are alluding to, I had knee surgery on Tuesday, had a little bit of a remnants of an ACL taken out, a couple bone grafts put in, and we'll be heading back under the knife here in a couple months to have another ACL reconstruction. I'll be like 25 years old again. Forget being 38. I'm pushing 40 on. I'll be back to 25. So,
my mind is boggled by that thought.
So, alrighty, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Blue White Tailgate Podcast. Make sure you check it out. Apple, Amazon, Spotify, wherever you get it. Also available on YouTube. Hit us up with your questions, comments, and concerns. We do appreciate the comments on YouTube. Want to appreciate all the support that we are getting. For Mike, Frank, and myself, have a great one, everyone. We'll talk next week.